Thank you so much for being here tonight. I'm Heidi. I'm the CEO and founder of Birth Story Media. That's a whole bunch of things, but an online course and a book and a local birth story boutique agency in Charlotte, North Carolina, where I take private doula clients. And I have been in partnership with Kathryn Cross, who's here with you from Anja Health since 2021, the inception of this company. And so thanks for being here tonight. If you guys have any questions, just put them in the chat. We'll try to monitor those. And one person, I'm super excited, is going to win access to Birth Story Academy. It's a 6-hour comprehensive online childbirth education course that I wrote with the director of obstetrics from Chapel Hill, Dr. John Thorpe. It's all medically accurate, but it's also from the lens of a doula and an obstetrician. So hopefully you guys will love and enjoy that class, but someone is going to win that class. And then Kathryn and Anja Health are going to be giving that same person a gift card. So we've got a package. And Kathryn, we're going to do that about halfway through the presentation, right?
Yeah, at around 8:30 ET.
Yeah, because we know, like, if you guys are like me, I have some children I have to put to bed here tonight also.
Yes.
So try to stick with us as long as you can, but about halfway through, we'll pause and we'll do a giveaway. So thank you so much for being here. Like I said, I'm Heidi and this is Kathryn. We're going to talk about stem cell research and banking tonight, but just a little bit about my story. I am a mom to a 10-year-old and a 9-year-old, and my 9-year-old has cerebral palsy. And so this is a difficult conversation. I still get tears in my eyes whenever I start to have this conversation with families, especially my own private doula clients, because it's the one thing nobody wants to talk about, right? But like, I'm in this big, beautiful house that I bought. And when I bought this house, I also bought homeowners insurance to go with it. When I bought my car, I also signed up for car insurance to go with it. When I decided to become a parent, before that, I actually decided to get life insurance policies so that I could take care of my family, hoping that none of those things would ever happen. I was hoping my house would never burn down. I'm hoping I will never get in a car accident. And I'm certainly was hopeful that I would never die, but I wanted to make sure that I had processes in place. Now, Kathryn gets very uncomfortable when I start saying things like this, but I purposefully am not a shareholder or stakeholder in Anja Health because I'm coming to you as a parent, as a concerned parent who doesn't have a financial leg in this game. I am here because I really want to be able to share with you guys my story. My child had a birth injury, so I had a very picture perfect pregnancy. I was very excited to try an unmedicated birth because I had had a epidural birth with my first, and like all parents, just had this picture perfect pregnancy and was worried about everything, right? But by the time I went into labor, I think some of my worry went away. Jagger's umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck 2 times. And when I was pushing, we saw a lot of heart decelerations. This is very common as a birth doula. I see this quite often in a birth room, and many times it's not dangerous. So in my child's story, there was lack of oxygen to the brain, which caused him to have a stroke, which left him with cerebral palsy. So there's a lot of diagnoses, but the stroke happened on my son's left side of the brain. It affected the right side of the body. And when we first were diagnosed, the very first question that they asked of me in the neurology office was, do you have stem cells? Did you bank your cord blood? And I'm like, bank my cord blood? I'm like, what is that? This is 9 years ago. And they were like, oh, okay. I felt like super in shame also, like I hadn't done it. So I was like left with our family having to go to try to find a match at a public bank, which to this day, 9 years later, we do not have a match. And Kathryn's going to talk a little bit about being mixed race. My family is not mixed race. We're a white family and still do not have a match for Jagger. So that's why I'm super passionate about this, because I was told on day 1 after a brain injury or a birth injury that stem cell transplant could have changed or saved my child's life. I want to tell as many people about stem cell research and stem cell banking so that you have the opportunity to choose public banking or private banking. So Kathryn and I bonded in 2021 because her brother also had a brain injury from a near drowning accident. So Kathryn's parents unsimilar to my own story where my child had a birth injury. Her brother at 1 year old had a near drowning accident, which caused damage to the brain, which caused cerebral palsy. And he passed away when he was 19 years old. I've been around the block a few times as a doula. And so I would love to say that in 1,200 births in 21 years that I've never seen a injury or lack of oxygen to the brain in the birth. But unfortunately, my child's story is not the only story that I have been witness to. And so I know the power of stem cell research, and I know the power of having opportunities. So I think it is really important that you guys are all here because, of course, we don't want to think about our 4-year-old getting leukemia or, like my story, a birth injury at birth, or like Kathryn's story, a near drowning accident. There's so many things from, a car accident to falling off the monkey bars that can cause a brain injury. And so Kathryn's going to talk about stem cell research tonight. So thanks for being here. It's very hard for me to tell my story. You can hear I'm still crying and quivering and shaking. And because my biggest regret is that I did not do stem cell banking. It's very hard to live with that as a parent when I had an opportunity to change the outcome and the trajectory of my child's life. And I took the brochure and I threw it in the trash at the OBGYN's office. So that's why we're here today, to try to give you a little bit more information. Thanks. Kathryn, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Heidi, for sharing your story. It's really amazing to connect with other folks that have a background with cerebral palsy, because I'll get into my personal story, but I also have a connection to cerebral palsy. And I found, even like, for instance, our newest teammate at Anja Health has a little brother with cerebral palsy. So I think I found myself amongst folks that have similar stories, and I feel really pleased to have found that community. But thank you so much, everyone else, for joining. Really excited to chat today about cord blood banking. So today I'm going to be answering the question, is cord blood banking worth it in 2024? And then in about 15 minutes, we're going to stop and do our quick giveaway that was mentioned when we promoted this event, and also feature our discount code, which you can get. It's Heidi's specialized discount code. So if you're a client with her, you may have already seen it, but it's Birth Story. You can get $199 off an Anja Health kit. But we will mention that again at the end, and I will put it in the chat as well. So a little bit about me. Like I mentioned, I have a personal connection to cord blood banking. So my younger brother had cerebral palsy because of a near drowning accident. So like Heidi mentioned, a lot of folks develop cerebral palsy because of an accident at birth. And actually, coincidentally, my younger brother had his umbilical cord wrapped around his neck, but they were able to catch it in time. So it ended up being that he wasn't born with cerebral palsy, but then he ended up developing it a year later from a near drowning accident. So this is me and my younger brother. And my mom started looking into treatments for cerebral palsy when his accident happened, and found also, like Heidi mentioned, that cerebral palsy can potentially be treated with cord blood stem cells. It can improve motor and social skills in children with cerebral palsy. So it's something that's always been near and dear to my heart. And then when he passed away a few years ago in 2021, I felt like I wanted to do something that would have been able to help him. So I founded Anja Health, and it's sort of his namesake in a way because his name was Andrew, so it's pronounced Anja. But now a little bit about what we do and what we're going to talk about today. So today we're going to be talking about why we're even discussing umbilical cords and placentas and how it relates to the stories that Heidi and I shared, the difference between private and public banking. Is it worth it to bank it in 2024? And also how Anja Health is different. And at any time, if you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat and I will answer them. So why are we talking about umbilical cords and placentas? So the umbilical cord and placenta are really rich with stem cells. Stem cells are our body's raw materials from which all other tissues and organs are generated. They're essentially like our body's master cells, and they have the potential to repair and replace any damaged cells and have the potential to be used to treat various medical conditions and diseases. So a lot of folks, I think it's kind of hard for them to wrap their mind around how stem cells work, but I think in a really good story that I like to refer to demonstrate how stem cells work is a story that we shared on our Anja Health podcast with a parent who had two sons that received a stem cell treatment, and they basically had an autoimmune disorder. Their immune system wasn't working properly, and they had Duncan's disease, also known as XLP. And so they essentially used chemo to completely wipe their immune system, and they were called bubble boys. They had a whole TV segment because they had no immune system. and then they received cord blood stem cells into their body. And because stem cells are so regenerative and they're like these blank cells that can be used to replace and repair damaged cells, they were able to essentially rebuild a new immune system from the ground up. And so they developed the blood type of their donor, and if they ever did 23andMe, then they would have the same exact results as the person that was their cord blood stem cell donor. So that's kind of a good way to think about it. But yeah, the umbilical cord and placenta in particular are one of the best resources of stem cells because they're really rich with stem cells. And it's also one of the least controversial and least invasive means of retrieving stem cells. So essentially, you may have heard in the past that stem cells can potentially be controversial because they can potentially be taken from embryos, but this is not controversial because they're taken from umbilical cords and placentas, and that's also non-invasive. Like if you get stem cells from someone's bone marrow, that's a very invasive procedure. And this is just something that's coming out anyway and is frequently just thrown away. So you may as well put it to good use. And also something that I wanted to throw in here as we're talking about the umbilical cord is delayed cord clamping is something that's often a part of folks' birth plans and standard at many hospitals. And we are compatible with that, which is a common misconception. A lot of folks think that you can't bank cord blood and delay cord clamping, but you actually can. And we typically recommend for up to 2 minutes. But Heidi, if you're a client of hers, she's mentioned that she very carefully monitors the cord blood banking process. And if you desire to do longer than 2 minutes of delayed cord clamping, then Heidi can help you with that and just assess based on the length and diameter of the cord. So yeah, we should be able to make it work with your birth plan. Next, I wanted to cover the difference between public and private banking. So when you think about umbilical cord blood and placenta stem cells, folks often think that you can potentially donate stem cells or you can keep it for yourself. And there's often some confusion about the difference between those. So essentially public banking is where you donate it to someone that needs it, which is you can do through Be the Match, and it's available to any patient in need of a transplant. And there's no cost to donate. However, if you then need cord blood stem cells yourself, like my family did and like Heidi's family did, then you won't have access to it and you'll have to dip back into that donor pool. And this is especially important if you're a person of color or mixed race, because donors tend to be solicited in high income areas. And so they're skewed white, and a lot of matches generally recommended that you're aligned ethnically. So you try to find someone of your same ethnicity. For instance, my family tried to find a donor that was half Chinese and half white because that's what my brother and I are. But that may be difficult to find in a donor pool versus with private banking on the right here. You get automatic access to a match. So it's anywhere from 50 to 100% match for parents, siblings, and the baby themselves, regardless of ethnic background. And you will definitely guarantee access to it in the future. And there are also various studies that demonstrate that if you're related to your donor, your chances of survival are much higher. So I think in a perfect world, everyone has their own stem cells privately banked and can potentially access them in the future. Yeah, I guess another good analogy would be like donating eggs versus freezing eggs for yourself. So I have a little bit about donation because I often get questions on that. But if you are looking to donate, there's so many requirements, and a lot of donations end up actually getting rejected. There's just a variety of things that you'll have to meet, like you can't have had tattoos in the past year and no history of cancer, no twins, things like that. So I end up, if parents are thinking about donation versus banking, I kind of mention this part of the donation piece. And obviously I'm biased, but I definitely think that parents should consider privately banking as a result so that they guarantee that access to their own stem cells and there aren't these various eligibility requirements that you have to meet. So some quick facts on cord blood banking. And so when I talk about this, I'm referring to private banking, which is what Anja Health does. So we estimate that in the next 18 years, 1 in 16 children may need stem cells to better their quality of life. This is based on ongoing clinical trials and the frequency of the diseases that clinical trials are currently treating with cord blood stem cells, and also the diseases that the FDA has approved to be treated with cord blood stem cells. And yeah, another quick fact is as high as 30% of people can't find a match. Like I mentioned, if you're a person of color or mixed race, it can be really difficult to find one. And this stat in particular is Black communities. So if you're a Black parent, your chances are generally almost as low as even 22% of finding a match. So yeah, and if you're mixed race at all, then it can be even lower. And finally, a fun fact that a lot of parents like to know about is 31 states actually have a recommendation or regulation that requires OBGYNs to tell parents about cord blood banking by law. So if you see your state here in dark blue, then your OBGYN should inform you about it. However, even if you live in a light blue state, then you should still consider cord blood banking and you can still do it. So I also wanted to highlight the placenta and the cord tissue piece beyond just cord blood, because I know cord blood banking is generally the term for what we do, but we actually also do cord tissue and placenta banking, which is where you take stem cells from the cord itself and also the placenta. And yeah, this is kind of a lot of science around what we do, but in case you happen to have a background in that, you can see that we emphasize banking the cord blood and cord tissue and placenta because the placental tissue is really, really rich with a variety of stem cells. So you get the greatest volume and variety of stem cells if you choose to do all three and bank all three for their stem cells. So yeah, once again, why bank the placenta? Advancements in the isolation of the specific components of the placenta are what have allowed for a surge in the possibilities for future treatment options, ranging from wounds to neurological degeneration to bone regeneration. And actually a lot of OBGYNs that I speak with mention that they're really interested in placenta banking because there's been a recent rise, specifically at Mount Sinai, of research related to placenta stem cells treating cardiovascular issues. So if you know anyone with a heart condition, you can potentially look into treating it with placenta stem cells as an option. But it's also been used frequently for eye injuries, wound healing, things like that. And it was initially started to be used as a substitute for skin grafts and to treat burn wounds. But in general, the placenta just has sort of a laundry list of what you can potentially use it for. So it's good to have it at your disposal. So yeah, as I mentioned, treating eye conditions and topical wounds is a really common use case for placenta stem cells as well. So another question that we often get is how can stem cells be used? Like if you do end up banking with us and you want to use stem cells in the future, how can you receive them? So you can receive them through a local injection, as you can see here. So this is common for things like arthritis. A lot of NBA athletes and athletes in general often receive stem cells through a local injection. Or you can do a systemic infusion, very similar to a blood transfusion. And for children with cerebral palsy, for instance, or those that have cancer, this infusion is one of the most common methods of receiving stem cells. So this is how the actual application would work. So this is a slightly graphic image, but just to demonstrate how placental tissue has also been able to help those with chronic venous leg ulcers. And we actually just this morning had someone DM us that she herself treated a leg ulcer with her own placenta, which was really, really interesting. So yeah, we are constantly hearing of these really amazing stories about folks treating themselves or a family member with their umbilical cord and placenta, which is really special. So yeah, if you're into the nitty gritty of the science, I will send this following this presentation. But yeah, this is just a bit more surrounding specific clinical trials related to using the placenta and being able to treat things, like I mentioned, like the foot ulcers, which is really common in folks with diabetes. So finally, to answer the question, is it worth it to bank in 2024? So I think if parents have the means, like I said, private banking is an excellent option. If parents don't have the means, there are some hurdles with public banking. As I mentioned, there's that laundry list of requirements, but honestly, anything is better than just throwing away the umbilical cord and placenta, which is what most commonly happens. Like they're just put into a biohazard waste bin and incinerated, and that's potentially life-saving. So it's just really, really sad that I always tell people our biggest competitor is the trash can because umbilical cords and placentas are just placed there. But here's why. So this is a chart of ongoing clinical trials using just cord blood stem cells. So I know in the past 10 minutes or so, I've gone through a lot of the placenta and cord tissue stem cell use cases, but this is just for cord blood banking and just clinical trials in the United States. There's also a lot of research happening in Europe and in South America related to cord blood stem cells. But yeah, whether it's via private or public banking, the possibilities with banking stem cells are endless and growing. So you can see this is sort of how many clinical trials are ongoing within these different categories. But 58% of clinical trials are in oncology, aka cancer. So cord blood stem cells are currently being used to treat leukemias, lymphomas, and cancers of the brain, breast, bladder, cervix, colon, esophagus, ovaries, pancreas, and others. 7% are in cardiovascular disorders, including congestive heart failure, critical limb ischemia, heart disease, and more. And 6% are for musculoskeletal disorders, so things like spinal muscular atrophy, osteoarthritis, cartilage defects, and even broken bones. And then there's sort of other ongoing clinical trials looking at even dermatology, hematology, infectious diseases and such. But I always tell people the story of one of my ex-boyfriends was diagnosed with ulcerative colitis and ended up having to lose his colon. And just with anyone that I've ever met who has gotten diagnosed with a disease that ends up being life-threatening, I automatically, the first thing I do is search the disease name and then cord blood stem cells. And usually there's at least some active clinical trial, if it's relatively common, using cord blood stem cells to help treat that disease, which is really promising. So for that ex-boyfriend of mine that got diagnosed with ulcerative colitis, he was like pretty far along in the process of looking at using cord blood stem cells to help treat his ulcerative colitis before being forced to lose his colon and get an ostomy bag. But yeah, ultimately the risk of using an alternative donor that he was not related to was too high. But if he had banked his own cord blood stem cells, then that wouldn't be a problem, because if the umbilical cord is from yourself and you're being treated with your own umbilical cord, then your body won't reject those stem cells. But if it's from an unrelated donor, then you can potentially get host versus graft disease, which is where your body rejects the transplant that you're receiving. So yeah, like in the case of my ex-boyfriend, if he had banked cord blood stem cells, he could have used it. But because he did not, then it was automatically moved off of the potential treatment options. And then he ended up having to lose his colon and get an ostomy bag. So yeah, I think if you just have anyone in the family, whether it's a genetic disease or not, that has some sort of ailment, it's worth looking into cord blood banking and what you can possibly do with it. So I also get the question often, what happens if I don't bank cord blood, cord tissue, or the placenta? So like I said, you will have to find a random donor's cord blood. The chances of survival are much higher if your donor is a relative. So on the right here is the chart that I was mentioning earlier. You can see here, this is months after receiving a stem cell treatment on the x-axis, and on the y-axis is the proportion of surviving. And this blue line is those that were related to their donor. So they were related to the person giving them cord blood stem cells. And this red line is those that were unrelated to the donor. So you can see that as months passed following a stem cell treatment, the proportion of surviving was on average much higher with those that were related to their donor. So that's why I think private cord blood banking is a really good potential option, because you want stem cells that are from someone that you're related to. And the best way to guarantee that is to bank stem cells from your own baby, because then anyone that you might know in your family that needs stem cells can potentially use it.
I just wanted to kind of chime in on your last graph. Like, one of the things that we see very commonly as we're raising children are orthopedic injuries. So I had 5 knee surgeries when I was in high school from being a soccer player. And I'm thinking like, gosh, what a really cool opportunity for our future generations that they could be receiving their own stem cells, or like a relative, like their sibling stem cells, when they tear their ACL in high school, you know?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, another con to not banking stem cells is you may have to find a donor, like I said, and finding a donor can potentially be expensive. Using a donor's stem cells are exorbitantly more expensive than banking cord blood. You can see here, this is the average cost of a stem cell treatment in 2020. And it's anywhere from most frequently 10,000 to 20,000, but can even be upwards of 100,000. So yeah, I think it's a worthwhile cost to bank cord blood. I know the best healthcare is free. So we're always working on making our prices more accessible, but Anja Health is about 30% more affordable than the industry average. So yeah, it's something that we really make as a core part of our mission. And yeah, this is a graph, like I said, that touches on the sort of mixed race and person of color angle of cord blood banking. So like I said, if you're a person of color or mixed race, your chances of finding a donor might be slim. This was Be the Match's most recent graph around the probability of finding a public donor match if you're looking for stem cells and you're Black, Asian, Hispanic or Latino, American Indian and Alaska Native, or white. Even if you're white, which is the highest percentage of receiving a public donor, then you still may not find one. So I think, yeah, it's still just at 79%. So for that remaining 21% of even white folks that want to have cord blood stem cells immediately available, I think cord blood banking is a really good option to safeguard from this. And I touched on this a little bit before as well, but this is the percentage of match. So if you bank stem cells for your own baby. Your baby is a 100% match for themselves. Babies can even use their own stem cells, even for certain genetic conditions. It does depend on the use case, but that's a common question we get is if it's a genetic disease, can we still even use the stem cells? And it really just depends on the disease. And we have our medical director review everything and what it's being used for and the medical history of the parents as well. So yeah, we will notify you prior to birth if we don't think you could use it. But yeah, pretty much that you can generally use cord blood stem cells and yeah, 100% match for the baby. So my younger brother could have possibly used his own cord blood stem cells. Siblings are 75% match. So he also could have used mine. Parents are 50% match. My parents could have potentially used my brother's, and 25% match for grandparents, which is another common question we get, especially when it comes to things like arthritis, which is a common cord blood stem cell use case. So I wanted to cover some case studies as well. I know I mentioned some of the use cases for cord blood stem cells already, but I think putting especially photos and hearing stories helps put into perspective. So this is a story of a 5-year-old named Quentin. When he was 5, he received a stem cell transplant for a form of cancer called acute lymphoblastic leukemia. He was the first to receive a combined transplant of stem cells from his little sister's umbilical cord and placenta. So I think cases like this really showcases why it's so important to also save stem cells from the placenta and not just the umbilical cord, because you can increase the volume and variety of stem cells that you're applying to the treatment. And now Quentin is in remission and has been for 14 years. So that's really special. And it's all because of his little sister's umbilical cord and placenta. In 2022, this was a really big story. The Wall Street Journal even published a piece about it, but it was announced that the 3rd woman ever was cured of HIV using an umbilical cord blood stem cell transplant. So this was from a related donor, and she showed no detectable signs of HIV since stopping her antiretroviral treatment in October 2020, and then received her cord blood transplant throughout since 2020. And then in 2022, it was officially announced that she was cured of HIV. Previously, there had been no known cure for HIV. So this is really, really important to take note of. And since 2022, more folks, I believe now it's at 7 folks, have received a cord blood stem cell treatment to cure themselves of HIV. So it's things like this, like you just never know what kind of research could come out. And I think that's another really special part about cord blood banking is you're sort of investing in the future value as well of the stem cells, because there's a potential use case kind of cropping up every year. This is also the story of a 57-year-old man who had a stroke, but resulting in right side paralysis and severe speech apraxia. And after receiving the cord blood stem cell infusions, he remained seizure-free for a long period, experienced significant pain reduction around 4 weeks post-treatment, and had occasional pain-free days. And speech improvements began about 6 weeks post-treatment. So this is him on the right, and on the left is the owner of this clinic, CBC Health, which is based out of Europe. But I actually recently interviewed someone at their clinic, and he mentioned that sometimes they see improvements after a cord blood stem cell treatment within days. Like he told me the story of a woman who had sort of like muscular degeneration and had a really difficult time even putting on clothes, and ultimately dropped out of college because of it, and then went to this clinic, received cord blood stem cells. And the 3rd day after receiving cord blood stem cells, she was making pancakes for her mom. And so, yeah, to go from not being able to put on clothing to being able to cook is like, yeah, absolutely amazing. And so, yeah, I think in particular, that case study was in the early days of research, but it's still just something really promising. And you can see how things can change so quickly if you have cord blood stem cells at your disposal. So this is another really famous case study, and the one that's most relevant for Heidi and myself. This covers Dr. Joanne Kurtzberg, who's in this photo. She is probably I would say like the queen of the cord blood stem cell industry, because she has been leading research around cord blood stem cells for decades. And she's based out of Duke. And so this is the clinical trial that my mom was looking to get my brother in. Yeah, she uses cord blood stem cells to treat metabolic disorders. She's also been looking at autism and most famously cerebral palsy, where participants are able to demonstrate significant improvements in motor function just 1 year after receiving stem cells from their very own umbilical cord. This is also the story of a young boy in Germany. He went into cardiac arrest, and ultimately that resulted in a vegetative state. But after receiving his own cord blood, he showed multiple improvements, including in motor skills, cognition, and speech. And so now that you kind of have a good overview of the cord blood banking space and what it is, I wanted to tell you a little bit more about Anja Health as a company. So yeah, we believe that stem cells are a lifesaver and not a luxury. So we want to make it accessible, and we're on a mission to make sure that parents have the greatest volume and variety of stem cells at their disposal, which is why we also offer placenta banking, and we try to do it affordably. So we start at $49 a month. And if you use the discount code that we dropped in the chat, you get a free kit. It's otherwise normally $199 when you first sign up. But with that discount code in place, it's just $49 to $99 starting 1 month after birth. We also have other payment plans, but I'll get into that later. So these are quality guarantees as a company. We have a collection kit that's compatible with placenta banking, FDA approved materials. It comes out of an AABB accredited lab. Our lab director is an AABB accreditor, which is the main oversight organization to ensure that labs in the United States are in good standing. And he's an inspector for the AABB, so he runs very tight ship. And our lab and our kit comes from his oversight. We also try to maximize stem cell count via manual processing. So the way that we process our stem cells optimizes for the greatest yield of stem cells. And so we're able to individualize the approach by making sure that a lab technician processes each umbilical cord and placenta by hand. So that's called manual processing, as opposed to automatic processing when you just run it through a robot, which is common at some banks. But we do manual processing to ensure that you get the greatest stem cell yield. We are able to do that with our team at our lab. And then we have storage for up to a lifetime with on average 30% less cost than the average bank. Like I said, we're also at an ABB accredited lab. We have a biological goods courier with 10 plus years of experience who will come pick up your umbilical cord and placenta after birth and bring it to our lab based in New Jersey. And then you get a dedicated Anja Health account specialist to help connect with you and guide you if you have any questions before or even during birth. So yeah, our lab is the first in the US to specialize in cord blood stem cells and the most reliable in the industry. So they're a partner that we work with. They also have a public bank side of things, but we work with their private bank. So we are essentially the private bank arm of what they do. But yeah, our lab has a 100% success rate with stem cell transplants on over 300 transplants. Like I said, we're also aligned with FDA and ABB accredited, and we do manual processing. This is how it works. We get a lot of questions around how can I just get this process going? And basically we do it in 3 steps. So number 1, you can get the kit at anjahealth.com. Definitely use the discount code in the chat to do that. Number 2, bring your kit with you to birth. The physician collects, and generally OBs and midwives, depending on who you're using, have collected cord blood stem cells before. So even if you just bring the kit as a surprise, they won't be surprised because they'll know what they're doing. But we generally do recommend that you at least mention that you're going to do it prior when you talk about your birth plan. And then number 3, you can call for pickup from anywhere in the United States, and we'll bring it to our lab. This is me in our lab based in New Jersey. And so this is the pricing breakdown. Like I said, it's $199 typically for the kit, but you can use the discount code to make this 0, and then you can select your plan. So it really depends on how long you want to store and what you want to store. So like I said, our most popular is to do all 3, cord blood, cord tissue, and placenta, because you get the greatest volume and variety of stem cells. But you can choose to just do 1 or 2 depending on your financial capabilities. And also if you want to do placenta encapsulation, for instance, then you could do our enhanced plan. But our most popular for sure is the all 3. So yeah, it's $49, $79, or $99 a month, depending on if you do 1, 2, or 3. And those payments go on for 8 years, but they can cover 20 years of storage. We also have
what happens at year 20?
Yeah,
So like all of a sudden your child is now an adult, you've paid for their stem cells. Let's say they didn't have to use them when they were a child, but as they age and we have research on cancers and cardiovascular disease 20, 30, 50 years from now, what would the child do in 20 years?
So yeah, 20 years, parents can choose to renew, but when the child turns 18, it becomes their property. So it's essentially their choice. Before that, it's the parent's property. Very similar policy with egg freezing and sperm freezing and such. And yeah, so at the 20-year mark, you can choose to renew, but we actually also have lifetime payment plans. So yeah, I know this graph is kind of a lot to take in, but we essentially have either 20-year plans or lifetime plans. Similarly, our payment plans, even for lifetime, go on for 8 years, but they can cover a lifetime of storage rather than covering 20. And then you can also decide based on whether you want to do cord blood, cord tissue, or also the placenta. And then you can either choose to pay later, flex pay, which is where you do a 20% down payment, or pay now, where you pay 100% up front. So yeah, we have various payment plans because we've had parents request different plans for us depending on their financial planning situation and yeah, their family structure. So we just like to keep options available to accommodate every different type of family. So now to go over some common FAQs, but we're almost at the end. So yeah, where stem cells stored, our lab is based in New Jersey, like I said, in Allendale. It's also a member of the Be the Match National Registry. They have that public banking arm that I mentioned. Since the facility is opening, it's processed over 35,000 units of cord blood, but they've dispatched 300 for treatments. And then another question that we often get is how far can cord blood be shipped and safely preserved? So we've done pickups even in Alaska and Hawaii, and we're still able to get it to our lab within less than 24 hours. So we basically have our courier system put it on the next flight out, and couriers go literally door to door. And it's a biological goods courier service, so they take very good care of it. Another question is who can use stored stem cells? So the patient, like I mentioned, the parents have rights to their own stem cells because it's their property. And when the child turns 18, then it becomes their property. So it's really your decision. We work with our medical director and any physicians that you might be working with in order to help you make an informed decision. But yeah, but it's your property at the end of the day. One other question we get is when should you order a collection kit? By 30 weeks is ideal, or even earlier. We generally recommend enrolling as soon as possible so that you don't forget. But generally by 30 weeks, I would say is when most people seem to start to think about their birth plan. And that's a good point where you can start thinking about it. If you do enroll with us prior to 30 weeks, then we'll wait to send you the kit so that it's not just sitting in your living room or anything like that, but we'll send it closer to birth. And our last question is, how do you know enough cord blood has been collected? We generally try to get at least 40 milliliters of cord blood, which definitely happens even if you do delayed cord clamping. But yeah, we have recommendations and instructions in the kit with pictures and everything. So yeah, your physician should know as well. So yeah, this is my information. We always have a real person on every single channel you can think of, even niche ones like Pinterest, we're active on. So if you have any type of medium that you prefer, then we can meet you where you are. And yeah, like I said, we always have a real person manning those lines. So you can feel free to call us, text us at 310-620-1663. I also have somewhat of a following on TikTok, and we have a company TikTok and my personal TikTok. We have a company Instagram where you can DM us, and we have highlights with our lab and even like clips from Heidi's podcast and our podcast as well with OBs and other doulas and midwives. And then we're on email too, and our site is anjahealth.com. So yeah, that's my entire presentation. But if anyone has any questions, you can definitely feel free to drop it in the chat. Yeah, I believe Heidi put our discount codes as well. So definitely use that and check out her course too. And you can use her code for that. So yeah, if there are any questions, feel free to drop it here. Heidi, is there anything else you think I should cover?
No, I just appreciate everybody coming and listening. And like I said, I'm not a stakeholder in this. I'm just a parent who is on a mission to teach as many people about stem cell banking as possible. I mean, selfishly, I would love Jagger to be able to find a match. And like I said, I deeply regret that I just got a brochure. I think if someone had done something like this or had a webinar or kind of, been a mentor, or if my doula had mentioned it, like, can't say for sure I would have done it, 2020 hindsight. Of course I would have done it. But back then, I'm not really sure. I mean, if that was something I would have added to the budget, but I certainly look at now, like I said, I can't go backwards. I just hope if this webinar today saves or changes one person's life, then it was worth an hour of my time. And so I'm going to keep doing these over and over again. And so I really appreciate everyone being here. I'm always a resource. So on Instagram, I'm birth.story.academy. I'm super accessible. Me and my 7,000 followers are not, I don't have 1 million followers. It's really me answering the direct messages. So I'm still small enough that it's just me. and I would be happy to talk to you guys and answer any of your questions or tell you my own personal journey with being a doula. Kathryn, here's a story that you haven't heard. I did have a doula client 13 years ago, and she was able to find a match in Korea,
Oh,
and they had to fly. It was again 13 years ago, but they had to fly all the way to Korea. Well, I mean, the baby was like 3 years old at the time, but had never rolled over from severe brain damage from the birth. The placenta detached early. And after the first stem cell transplant, she was able to roll over.
oh wow.
For the second stem cell transplant, she said her first word. And so just such massive improvements in like physical abilities and fine motor skills and verbal cognition. I mean, it's a miracle. And it is really important as a doula that I say delayed cord clamping is also really important. And Kathryn knows the story. I had somebody bank with Anja. We waited 18 minutes for that big, thick, juicy cord to uncoil and still be able to collect enough cord blood to bank. So as a doula, I'm watching your cord blood like a hawk. Like I'm like really waiting for that big juicy cord to like unravel so that your baby gets a lot of that good rich cord blood stem cell and then also enough to be able to bank. So it's important that your midwife, your OBGYN, your doula, like somebody is making sure that that's a balance.
Yeah, even after this, if anyone has any questions, you can feel free to DM either of us. I will drop our contact information in a follow-up email and follow up about the gift card, and I'll send this presentation and the discount codes as well. But yeah, I really appreciate everyone taking the time tonight.
Yeah. Congrats, Deborah.
Yes.
We'll see you in class.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thanks, Kathryn. Bye.